We're on time within a few seconds, which is always a bit of a win. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Roy.
It's nice to see you again. And so this morning's subject is implementing a coaching culture, or what coaching is for sports teams. No need for them sort of shenanigans at work. We're going to be talking about coaching. And I guess the thing that gets me is before I sort of stepped out of corporate world to this world, which is several years ago now, never mentioned. It was never something that had been mentioned. It was training. It all morphed into training. It was chit chats. I didn't do it for my people. And so the question is, what's happened in the last 7 years? Is this a fad that will go past, or is this something that's always been around? It's about time we woke up to this.
It's a really good question. I think, do you mind if we take a step back a little bit and even talk about what coaching even is? Because that
Please do. I've actually got it set up so I can do something on the board if I need to. You know, our little thing.
I just love flipping over into a whiteboard and things like that. It's just a thing of beauty. What can I say?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, really, when you're in management, I mean, the first rule of being in management is that you've always got to be on the lookout for talent. You've always got to be on the lookout to hire good people who are going to fit with the team, who've got the functional skills and expertise and competencies to be able to do the job well. But most importantly, and non-negotiably, you've got those attributes to be able to continually develop and everything else. So take that as your general role as a manager. But then the rest of the time, when you're actually functionally day to day in the process of managing people, really you've got 4 hats to wear. And the first one is really the delegation hat, which is what we might call the supervisory hat if you wanted to. And you're going to spend a good chunk of your time basically giving people tasks. That's kind of what, when you first move into management, you sort of think of that as sort of what the role is, right? It's supervisory. It's how to be a supervisor. And Roy is drawing it on the board right now, and he's putting supervisory at the top of the board for a reason. But when you give people tasks to do, typically what happens is they then go and do them, or they go and attempt to do them, or maybe they don't. And so you've got to work out, if they don't, why not? Is it because they can't or because they won't? And if they can't, well, maybe it's because there's a gap in their knowledge. And what you've got to do then is you've got to put on one of your other hats, which is your training hat. Okay. And maybe about 10% of your time, you probably either training them, which is teaching them new stuff they didn't know how to do, or arranging appropriate training for them. And then if they don't, well, that probably speaks to some kind of a cultural issue, which, by the way, the first thing you should be doing there is looking in the mirror and kind of looking at this. Nadine is saying, by the way, that people can't really see what you're drawing. So hopefully his new pen has actually helped with that, Nadine, because I can definitely.
Yes. That's why I've changed the pen.
Can you overwrite the first bit you did?
I can. I'll tell you what, I'll start drawing again while you talk. How about that?
That's good. No, there we go. That's right. Don't worry. There we go. Hopefully that's helping now a little bit. So the second hat you might put on is a little bit of what we might call the mentoring hat, which is where you walk your talk, you show how things aren't done round here. Because really culture is the way we do things round here. And so that mentoring piece is about, I suppose, inculcating the culture into your people, into the team members, and that's really, really very helpful. Yes, Nadine is saying yes, thank you very much. The new pen has helped. Excellent. And again, about 10% of your time, just broadly speaking, is going to be spent doing that mentoring bit. But then the final piece of the jigsaw, this is the difference that makes the difference when it comes to management. Over a third of your time is going to be spent on coaching. And coaching is really where we find that they can do something, but you want to reinforce it when they do it well. So you want to catch them doing something right. Or maybe there's an area where they're doing it okay, but they could probably do it even better. So it's helping them to self-discover through the great insightful questions that you ask, how they can do it even better. Because if they come up with it themselves, well, it's their data and they tend to learn from that an awful lot better. Or maybe there's something where they need a bit of course correction. Maybe they haven't got it quite right. Maybe there's something which really speaking, they need to do it differently. So it's working through with them. Every time there's some kind of a task that you've given them and they do it, how do they do more of the good stuff? How do they do some bits even better? And how do they do the things that aren't working? How do they do those things differently? So this is the difference between telling somebody what to do and asking them questions about how they can improve. And coaching is the most important part of a manager or a leader's job. How do you get your people to be even better than they currently are? So to answer your original question, which is, has this been around for a long time? The answer is yes, it has. And it's certainly not just the last 7 years. But
turn that off.
Getting a lot more common is certainly during the last 7 years. So, Roy, your thoughts?
Yeah, the whole thing about coaching was very rarely, well, never mentioned. What sort of triggered this change? That it became, it went into business folklore. Has it actually gone into business? Is this, if we talk to 20 and odd companies, if we did a survey of 20, 30, 40 companies, major organizations, and we talked about their coaching culture, I mean, what do you think they would say?
I think you might get odd managers who do it, but they are the odd managers. And you can tell they're odd because they stand out a bit. I mean, so the experience I've got of working with a lot of clients, and certainly our larger clients, is you'll see occasional managers who maybe have experienced it on their way up and they do it. Maybe some of them have even been trained to do it. But a lot of times what you find is managers who kind of find themselves in a management position because they've been promoted through the Peter principle to some extent. You understand that basically they just get the job because they were really good at their previous job, which isn't necessarily a great qualification to suddenly become a manager always. And that means that they tend to do what was done to them. And if their boss didn't do it, chances are they won't do it either.
I guess when you go into leadership or management roles, I mean, these things are not sort of democracies. Someone else decides that you get into this, or if you start a business, you decide that you get into this, and quite often it's because you was good at the last job. And I always liken it that, if you're, it's like saying to someone who's good at sewing spacesuits, we're going to promote you to astronaut. And it is a completely different job. And when people go into leadership or management roles, they tend to do two things. They tend to do what happened to them before because they liked it, or completely opposite because they didn't. And bear in mind that, if you have a range of managers all doing the same or different because they liked it or didn't like, and bringing their management style into this organization, we end up with peers who work in completely different ways, and it's just confusing, and nobody really knows what good looks like. So where does a coaching culture begin? Where do you put it? Do you train a manager and just say, right, you start coaching and hopefully get across these things? Where does it come from? And the next question is, what are companies missing out on because they don't have it?
I think that they're both excellent questions. So pulling that back a little bit, we talk about coaching culture. What's a culture? What is a culture? A culture is a way that people behave, right? So if you're looking for the way that collectively, organizationally, we behave, this is our, if you like, this is our organization's personality expressed through our behaviors, then really this is the way that a collection of people are acting. So a coaching culture is a way in which the people within the organization all universally support each other, empower each other, and encourage each other through open, hopefully constructively challenging conversations where they ask each other maybe slightly awkward questions, maybe slightly difficult questions, but they're the sorts of questions that are born out of trust. And trust is usually born out of vulnerability and openness, which means that ultimately what you've got to have is an organization where people get on with each other, but they trust each other not to be backstabbing, playing politics in a negative way, all those kinds of things. So it speaks to a huge, deep area, really. But what's the difference that it makes? I mean, I call coaching the difference that makes the difference. And certainly in terms of productivity, but also mindset, welfare, how people are feeling about their day to day, all of those things, it can make a huge difference on those as well. Is it shows up in your bottom line. I mean, the most hard-nosed bean counter out there, when they see the difference in results between a business where everybody is joined up, they're actually thinking in the right way, and they're constantly empowering each other to be better than they currently are by asking those difficult questions, but the questions that we all know are going to get asked after every single thing. Well, they even end up sort of self-coaching by saying, well, what can I do different to that? What went well that I can do even better? What's actually I should be doing more of that? You end up coaching yourself by asking those questions all the time. It's this constant iterative improvement. And people talk about continuous improvement programs. A coaching culture is the mindset that underpins the truly successful continuous improvement program. And that's really the root of it. That makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the closest I ever came to coaching from my boss, who I was actually just speaking to a couple of weeks ago, and he only ever said one line to me, and years, he kept on going up, I kept on following behind him, and he said to me one line. He says, "In order to change behaviour, it's not about the things that you tell, it's about the questions that you ask." And it was so rare when that sort of thing happened. I remembered it. And at my age, I forget more than I've ever been told, I guess. But it was, I think this is it. When coaching members of staff, the approach is actually not that far different from changing behaviours of prospects. It's the questions that you ask that make the difference. And you mentioned some good things there. What can we do more of? What can we do better? What can we do different? And I think just with those three lines in our talk track, that can really make a difference. We don't have to go crazy on these things. If we haven't got a coaching culture, starting there, I think is a great start. And Nadine, thank you, Nadine, for joining us, and thank you for helping me out with my pen. There's a fine line between being a coach and being a mentor, particularly when clients hire you for your experience. Ooh.
I think it's a very valid point, and here I think Nadine is talking about coaching clients rather than coaching staff, but actually some of the same rules apply. And actually I'd throw in sometimes actually the training bit comes in as well, because there comes a point where if there's a gap in their knowledge and they just genuinely don't know something, well, just sitting there and asking them constructively challenging questions isn't going to help them to suddenly know it. You can help yourself discover some of it, but there comes a point where they just don't know something technical. You're going to have to teach them. So you're absolutely right. I mean, ultimately, to the extent that coaching is part of personal development, sometimes it's about mentoring, showing them how things are done, walking the talk, building on your experience, using your war stories, the scar tissue. It's far, far cheaper for somebody else to learn from your failure than it is to make their own mistakes. So mentoring is really helpful, and the training aspect of it, sometimes there's elements they just don't know, so you're gonna have to teach them. The skill of it from a manager's point of view is recognizing when to stop showing off with your own knowledge and to help them to lead their own. Certainly a problem that I had in my early days of management, and I really admit it, I screwed up loads, where basically it was the moment where I would sort of go, well, you just sit there and learn, because I think I know all about this. Let me show off my incredible knowledge. And it's great for my ego. Marvelous. A bit of ego stroking for me, but absolutely shit for them to learn. Sorry.
Yeah, I must admit, the number of times where I ripped my shirt open and underneath was a big S, super manager, and I'd type away and do the code, and then I go, oh yes, the old bastard can still do it. And that was not coaching. Probably didn't help a huge amount, but man, I felt good at the time. Talk about the endorphin rush. Yeah. It was terrible, and fills me with horror. But now here we go. Something else. Nadine's made another comment. Let's be clear to managers: they don't become a coach overnight.
Right, absolutely. Funnily enough, this is so counterintuitive because I mean, certainly as a when you're a functional human being working within a particular function and you're at a functionary level, shall we say, you tend to have to answer the questions, not necessarily ask them. But actually, again, in a coaching culture, you can be coached in how to coach and building that iteratively at every level. So ultimately, what you're doing is, as a manager, you're not just getting them to be the best they can be within their role, you're also helping them to become successful. Roy, by the way, has got a bad throat, hence him quickly going off to fill his glass of water because he's bouncing off everywhere. By the way, Roy, your microphone's still on, so that could get interesting. So yeah.
I'm actually going to fetch a book. So
okay, there you go. So I saw you had a glass of water, so there you go. But yeah. You've got this whole thing about coaching. It's iterative. We get it right, and yeah, you're absolutely right. They don't become coaches overnight. None of us do. And in fact, even those people who are very experienced in coaching can always still improve. And I think this is the point about having a growth mindset. You never get to that sort of fixed point where, well, that's it. I'm an expert in coaching now. No, you can always still get better. You can always still get better, and every single iterative time you do it, you improve. So yeah, you've just got to start somewhere with this stuff. It makes a huge difference.
And certainly with the developing this, it is iterative. But we talk about the Sandler triangle: the behavior, attitude, and technique. And I think if the attitude is I need to recognize what we should be doing during this conversation. Is this a training conversation, stuff they don't know? Is this a mentoring conversation, which is the way we do stuff around here? Or is this a coaching conversation as they know it, but they're not using it? And I think those triggers, I mean, certainly when we go back to this thing, and I'm hoping Nadine can still see it, I'm hoping for a thumbs up here, that actually this asking people to do things, getting people to do things, and supervising and collecting data. And I think collecting data, which then gives us the trigger, is this a celebratory moment? Great job. Or if they could do it better, is it a training moment? Is it a mentoring moment? Or is it a coaching moment? And so the staff understand what is actually happening, because when I started in business in sales, we had the max, which was the Monday morning ass kicking. And that's basically, that was as much coaching as we got. We did well if we didn't get his ass kicked, but it was just called the max. But wherever we are on this, we have a decision to make. And if you're a manager and you're wearing the training, coaching, and mentoring hat all at the same time, it's confusing to the person who's in front of you. And you're not really quite sure which way to go. So you've got to be really clear, what is this moment? And a decent upfront contract saying, we are now having, this is the moment we're going to have, and this is what it's about. So it reduces the level of anxiety within the person you're working with, so they can actually concentrate on what we're trying to do here. And that's hard, because if everything feels like a Mac, every conversation is tortuous, right? And how is it? I mean, when you was working your way up the greasy pole, when managers only ever spoke to me, it was to moan at me for something. It's rarely did I get any development.
Yeah, I mean, this is the old joke, isn't it? The beatings will continue until the morale improves, which funnily enough, very rarely works. But again, we're going back to that point about it being a culture. And I made the point so fast that it probably slipped by. But the key thing that underpins this culture is a culture of openness and trust. You have to trust people's good intent, that actually these conversations are part of the norm. This is not career limiting. In fact, this is where your career will grow. is through actually being open about your own limitations, because we all have limitations, but those limitations are opportunities for growth. And that means what you've got to do is establish, and I think you hinted at this with the phrase upfront contract, very, very clear guidelines about the way in which we operate. So you have parameters which are defined by process. You also have parameters that are defined by the values of the business. So providing you do not go outside of the values of the business and work contra to the values of the business, and providing that you work within our processes, you are free to be as creative and make mistakes and everything else as you want. The minute you go outside of those basically carefully defined parameters and guide rails, well, then that's a different conversation, because now you're working against us rather than with us. But the point is that you've got to have the permission to experiment, to be able to learn, to be able to grow, to be able to feel like you're not going to be held at gunpoint just for making a well-intentioned mistake in the pursuit of improvement and in the pursuit of being creative. And by doing this, you build people's confidence, their empowerment, their innovation, their creativity. You get them to be the best they can possibly be. They feel very engaged. And you as a manager get to do a whole lot less grunt work. You show me a manager who is run off his or her feet, and I'll show you somebody who doesn't coach.
And I think that's why we call it the 3 Ps, don't we? In Sandler. Remind me, there was
permission.
What word? Permission. So excellent. Permission to do stuff.
Yeah. You got
in the guide rails.
Potency, so the power to act within those guide rails. And actually, when we talk about potency, it's almost to have that kind of autonomy, that agency, that sense of self-control, which again speaks to people's sense of self-worth. People are looking for autonomy, agency within the control of their own lives. But that power to operate almost as though they have the same power as you as the boss, providing they're within those guide rails and within what you're talking about. And then finally, protection, the 3rd P. And that means that basically going to get the Monday ass kicking, MAKS, the max, the Monday ass kicking session, and they're not going to get beatings for doing what you've agreed with them that they can do. So you have to have a culture which allows them and enables them to do that, so that it's not career limiting. That is not to say that we're a fluffy, tree hugging, crystal worshipping bunch of open-toed sandal kind of weirdos who go, oh yeah, everything's fine, you can get away with doing whatever you want to do. That's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about a business here. There have to be rules, and there has to be a ladder of consequences going outside of it. But within the rules, there has to be freedom, and there has to be everything we've just talked about, the ability to improve.
And I think the 3 Ps, the potency, the permission, and the protection, is a very, very straightforward way of thinking on how to develop your staff. Unfortunately, I mean, it might happen that, as you said, managers who are run off their feet don't have time for that. And they're firefighting, and they've got so much to do, and they get all this lumped on them, which leads to stress, it leads to absenteeism, it leads to errors, and it's bad for the business. And certainly those 3 Ps, I think, is if you can think of every time you delegate. And I was working with a company in Liverpool where I did a session on delegation, and the CEO was there and his senior staff. And what basically happened is the CEO was running around making tea and doing all the grunt work because he didn't want them doing it. But he was doing no CEO stuff, and the business was flatlining. And really, having those guide rails to say, okay, here's what you do. You are accountable for this, and you become the boss of this project. And we can talk another day about things like RACI, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. That's a whole different subject. But I think when you give these guide rails and the parameters, you can then collect the data that we talked about here for the supervisory, and you can then work on continuous improvement for every member of staff. And management, you can't manage en masse. You have to manage individually. And I think that's just a few simple tools could make a massive difference in the performance of the staff. And we talked a few weeks ago, didn't we? There's sort of 570,000 more jobs out there than people willing and able to do it. So you better make your own people more efficient. How are you going to do it?
Well, this is an important point. You just brought up that phrase, and it's seductive, isn't it? Efficiency. It's seductive because sometimes efficiency, it looks like that's the thing to pursue because it saves money, it saves time, it saves resources, it saves effort. But never sacrifice effectiveness for efficiency. If something's really efficient but it doesn't get you to the right outcome, you just get to the wrong outcome quicker and cheaper, and that's not good. Okay, so let me give you an example, and it's an example that hits a lot of managers, and I'm guilty. I did it myself for years, where I thought that it's quicker and easier to, for example, broadcast an email out to everybody in the team or even to the whole organization, because then I have, quote unquote, communicated to them. Now that, I'm afraid, and close your ears if you get offended by swearing, is bollocks, because you haven't communicated. Communication is about achieving shared understanding, and you cannot achieve shared understanding by broadcasting an email, because there's no tone of voice in there. People read it in the wrong tone of voice. They misunderstand it. They don't understand where it's come from, and it's your fault because you've drafted it in such a way that actually it cannot possibly be congruent with every single person's communication style. It can't be. It just can't be. You've got to manage on a one-to-one, just like Roy said.
I think you keep on, because I have this like mental block about who actually says this, but one of my favorite phrases is the biggest problem with communication is
the illusion that it's taken place.
The illusion that it's taken place. And I'm going, I know who it is, and I always get the name wrong. Who is it?
George Bernard Shaw.
Good man. Biggest problem with communication is
I get to exercise my little professor. Thank you for that.
There you go. Yeah, biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's ever taken place, and certainly there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on there. So we only got a few minutes left. Coaching. If someone's not coaching, what are a couple of good things that we've probably mentioned that they can do today to actually start coaching their staff?
Learn to ask questions. The biggest difference you make as a manager, or actually in life generally, is not through the things you tell, it's through the things you ask. You change people's minds by actually getting them to think. And the only way you can get people to start thinking is by asking them an insightful question. I'm not just asking about like a simple, high level, lazy why type question. Oh, why'd you do that? Because you'll get a lazy answer. Ask the question behind that. Okay, and why did you do it like that? Okay, that's interesting. And what effect did that have? What were you aiming for? Okay, and how do you feel that went? Okay, if you had your time again, would you do it different to that? Okay, what would you do different? And just keep asking who, what, where, when, why, how, which. The open interrogatives, as they're called. These are the important questions.
Dad, I know certainly. When someone says, "Why didn't you do that?" I always struggle to answer it. To be fair,
it's got an implication of judgment, hasn't it? It's a dangerous one, isn't it? The why didn't you?
Yeah, why didn't you? So yeah, if you'd have tried, say again.
Frame it as a positive. I think is
really a positive. Yeah. If you had your time again, what would you have done?
Yeah, that's it.
And I think, say, coaching is a brilliant thing. It's something that is a developing art, and even Steve Jobs had a coach, and we know who that man was. Bill, yeah, and so here's the thing: go away, ask better questions. And it's the questions that you ask that change behaviours, not the things that you tell. Matthew, would like to add anything else?
Absolutely. Just very simple. Ask smart, listen hard, ask again.
Brilliant. 2948, 2950. Matthew, if we want to get hold of you, what do we do?
You email me, mdh@sandler.com. You phone me, 07715 269 724. You maybe even think, you know what, I'd really like to know a little bit more about sales, in which case you message me on LinkedIn today and I'll book you in for the little executive briefing I'm doing for 2 hours on Thursday morning, 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock. It's on Zoom and it's free to attend. So if you fancy a little bit of a sales briefing, let me know.
And they're really good. It's the how buyers are now buying, how sellers are now selling, and where it can all go to Tom Tit. So Thursday, yeah. So that's me. My name's Roy Johnson. Roy.Johnson@Sandler.com. 07-867 525 868. We'll see you next week. I think we've got a couple of subjects we can talk about next week, and I think the one I'm going to go for is manager or leader. You know, what's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely, big difference.
God, half an hour. It goes quickly when we're talking our stuff, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? There you go. Well, we could go on about this all day, couldn't we? Anyway, I suppose it is time to be goodbye from him.
Goodbye from him. Oh, him.
No worries. Goodbye. See you all next week.
See ya.